So, I've been thinking a lot about sobriety and what it's meant for me. And speaking of sobriety, I'm not completely sober. I got to put a Zyn in. And I got some coffee here. So, obviously, my sobriety only goes so deep. But I started smoking cigarettes when I was probably 13, probably younger, 12, 11. I didn't have a big habit or anything, but, smoking in the back with my friend Jeff, stealing them from his sister. And then, I don't know, probably when I was 13, 14, 15, I actually had a habit. Like, I would smoke, 7 cigarettes a day and maybe more if I was out with my friends all day. It was kind of like a central thing, like became like this part of what I did, like can we smoke there? Or let's go smoke, or let's go hang out where we can smoke, And yeah, it's interesting how that happens. How you design your life around your addictions. I mean, I like to smoke cigars too, and before I started doing these Zins, I mean, I was like doing a cigar like every, 5 times a week, not on the weekends a lot of times because my ex-wife did not like me smoking cigars, but I would go to the cigar shop, in the middle of the day and get some work done and smoke a cigar. And my life, was kind of revolved around that. And that's, if I hadn't, started doing some Zins and stuff just to get my nicotine craving in check, I'd probably still be doing that. I enjoyed it. I liked it. But it's an addiction, and it's, your life kind of revolves around, if you can get your fix in, And I enjoy a nicotine buzz. I enjoy a caffeine buzz. I mean, I enjoy all kinds of buzzes. I just don't partake in them anymore. Because it's just, I think for me, it's trying to get as close to I can to a peak human experience as possible, Who was I listening to the other day? Oh, I was listening to Steve-O interview Maynard James Keenan, the lead singer of the band Tool. And it's like people, including myself, we get to this realm where this is our reality, right? Like trees and ground, earth and gravity and air and water and all the things that we have to deal with. And then we just want to escape. We want to go back to this It depends on what you believe in, whether you believe in spirit or consciousness continues or not. But let's just assume that before you're in this body, you're in some sort of spiritual form. Let's just assume that. And let's assume that potentially after this body, you're in some sort of spiritual form, whether it's going back to the one consciousness or dissolving into a legacy on this earth. I mean, you could argue that a spiritual form is just simply your legacy as well. It could be like a memory of you is a form of you living on, right, after you're dead. So if you create something in this life that's worth remembering, well, that's kind of a spiritual form of you living on. So even if you're an atheist in a way, your life, your legacy outlives you in memory. And what is memory? Well, memory is consciousness. So you outlive your life. I mean, unless you just were born in a desert and died in a desert and no one knew you, your life after this life at least lives for a generation or two beyond. Somebody's going to mention your name. So anyway, let's just call it that. Before and after you've incarnated into a human body, or before you woke up as a human, You were something spiritual before that, and you are going to be something spiritual after that. So what is that spirituality? Well, obviously you're not bothered by a body. You don't have a body. You're a spiritual being. And now we get into this body, and then we want to just escape out of it because it's hard. That's the thing about being in a body, is that it's, you do have to deal with gravity. You do have to deal with like mundanity, whatever that word, the mundane. But we just want to escape. I mean, my nicotine and caffeine addiction is just escaping from the subtle subtle vibration of being a human grounded, incarnated in a body. And we think that we're getting a peak or more peak experience by escaping. I mean, even drinking alcohol, like you're killing your brain cells so that you can stop thinking, like your mind will slow down so that you can relax. I mean, like your mind is just like this, it's like this muscle that's just constantly flexing, and you're just craving this relief from it. And then when you drink alcohol, it just kind of like, it relaxes, or it dies, really. And you can just get this slight relief from thinking so much. And I don't know exactly what marijuana does. I mean, I was a marijuana user for a long time, but from what I understand, it's still below the threshold of thinking. Like, it basically lowers your vibration, your energy below thinking a little bit, or it just slows it down or something. Because I remember feeling very inspired a lot of times when I would smoke, like excited about the world, excited about my future, my opportunities, my creativity. I mean, that would last for, maybe 45 minutes after I smoked, and
welcome to Minnesota.
It was a good feeling, and I chased it for a long time. One thing that I realized when I was a marijuana smoker was that, of course, I thought that I was creative, and I thought I could do more interesting things when I was high, like especially when it came to music. Like I would get in this, I would smoke, and then I'd sit down and record something or play my guitar or play my drums, and I would think that I was having some sort of a higher expression, and a lot of times I would go back and listen to whatever I did, and, after I came down, and I think it was probably worse than when I was sober and creating things. It was like, when I'm sober and creating things, I'm just doing what needs to be done. I'm not like outside of myself thinking that what I'm doing is so great. Like, I think what happens when you're stoned is that it's like what you get, like you get the giggles, like the first 10 times you smoke, you have a lot of laughs and you're laughing a lot. I think that's because you're like, some people have the experience where they're witnessing themselves from the outside, and it's almost like we're seeing the absurdity of what we're doing, and it just becomes really funny. And that's what happens when you're creating a lot of times, when you're stoned or high, or I don't know. I've never really done any other real harder drugs than that, other than like mushrooms and LSD. And I never tried to like write music or perform music or do anything about music when I was on psychedelics. That was all I wanted to do, was just sit down and be in the moment when that happened. But because of this, it's almost like a separation that happens this observer is like more there when you're high. I think I'm just speaking off the cuff here, but I think your observer is kind of like, it's in awe of what you're doing. Like you're creating something and that's really cool, but what's the being that's creating isn't quite at its peak in terms of its ability to express. So even though your observer is in awe of you, you're somewhat incapacitated in your ability to perform. And that's why I think, when I'm sober, again, it's like I'm sober. That's not really that's just being without substance. And I mean, I live most of my life without anything beyond nicotine and caffeine, all of my life without that. So I don't have that. I don't have any other experiences really. But when I'm creating now, I'm getting an immediate, it's almost like a latency loop or a latency when you're high. It's like you're getting feedback a little bit after you're actually doing the thing. And when you're sober, the feedback is right there. And so you don't even really notice what you're doing in the moment. You're just doing what needs to be done. And what I found is like right now, I'm going to the studio right now to record some vocals, and I will get into the studio and I will do the best I can to be on pitch and to be in time and to have my voice, not clean always, but clear. I know what the fundamentals are to deliver a decent vocal track. And I'll just be focused on those things. I won't be focused on some sort of emotional, there's emotion there, and I do emote when I'm recording my vocals, but at the same time I'm using my mind and my ability to critique myself in a sober way about all the imperfections of the lines that I'm laying down, mostly pitch, So, and I'm just doing that kind of like a surgeon, and I'm not, when it comes to listening back to a vocal line that I just did and hearing something that's out of key, there's no emotion there. It's just, okay, I need to hit that word again. I need to hit that line again because I didn't quite hit it. Get the pitch right on that. So I go back and I do it, and then once I get kind of that surgical process down, that's very much just in the moment, being totally trying to be as honest as I can and trying to have as high of a standard as I can in that moment. And then I'll listen to it afterwards, or once I get the whole take down, I'll listen to it. And when I listen to it in that, immediately after I've recorded it, there's not a lot of emotion when I'm listening to it. I'm just listening, and I'm really just focused on, did I perform that well? But then a day or two later, I'll put it on and I'll hear the emotion in it, and I'll hear all the process that I had been going through for a year in order to write that song, and in order to sing it just the way I've always sang it, which is with some emphasis and emotion. And I'll hear the emotion in it that's in addition to the surgical nature of how I recorded it, the sober nature of how I recorded it. And so, and I think that's just kind of the way life is that when you go through your life in a sober way, you don't even notice all of the beauty that you're creating as you're going through your life. It's like the vibration is just steady. It's not peaking and valleying and a lot of drama. But then, 6 months after you've set your mind to doing something, you realize all of the things that you've done in order to accomplish that thing that are seemingly mundane, but then they start to reap rewards. They start to grow fruit. I mean, gardening's a great example. I mean, gardening can be excruciatingly boring, weeding, and it can be very pleasant too. I mean, depending on where you are in your ability to be present, it can be very healing, but it's not necessarily exciting. It's not like hunting a deer, which can be very boring too, but when you're actually in the process of drawing your bow and shooting that bow, that's very exciting. There's not a lot of that in gardening until you actually, one day you go out and your vegetable is ripe and you pick it and it's perfectly good, perfectly tastes wonderful, and all of that reward, all of that mundane is there for you to taste. So I guess that's a really good analogy, is sobriety is like being a gardener. It's this long, I don't know, I don't want to say long, it's this process of just being present and cultivating and weeding your garden, and being able to be present in that journey and delayed, sobriety is definitely a form of delayed gratification. When you're sober, you can't just reach for something to get gratified. You actually have to live on nature's terms and but just be present for the rewards when they come. And that's also being in alignment, I guess you could say, with a higher power, because you have no control, or only control you have when you're sober in terms of rewarding yourself is doing the thing that needs to be done. And the timing of that reward is up to a lot of other different factors. You could call it God, you could just call it the mechanisms of the world and how things process, and you're also at the mercy of things changing in your world, surprises, pivots, all of these things that are out of your control. That's why in AA, that's why the Serenity Prayer, people say that a lot. I'm going to screw it up, but it's basically saying, I will let all of the things that are out of my control go. I will not obsess or worry about that. Because why? Because you can't control. But you can control some things. Like you can control what you do, what you wake up and what you do that day. Most of the time. But maybe you're sick, or maybe something happens in your life and you can't do that thing. Well, then you let that go. And same with emotional disturbances in your life. When you're sober, you can't reach for, or you can, but you choose not to reach for that relief valve, that pressure relief, which is alcohol or drugs. You don't have that option, or you choose not to have that option. And that's a really brave and difficult choice for a lot of people, to just process that emotion as it comes and not have a way to delay it, because there's no, whatever emotional thing that you have to deal with, it doesn't go away. It's, alcohol or drugs that's not a way to process that. It's just a way to delay your response, or you're dealing with it, which, again, I don't judge anybody who, needs some relief from their emotional disturbance, but don't make the mistake that's dealing with it. I mean, there's all this romanticism on television and in movies about, somebody somebody's wife dies and then they start drinking and, for 6 months, and that's the way they deal with it. Well, and everybody understands, we understand why he's getting hammered every night, because he's grieving. Well, he's not really grieving. He's just delaying the grief. And then, of course, in the movie, a lot of times the person finally pours the whiskey down the drain and starts working out and starts getting his life together, and then he actually processes the grief, or he doesn't use that crutch anymore, and he becomes a functioning person again. So anyway, I didn't really know I was going to get into sobriety today, but the main thing that I wanted to say was that it's a peak human experience to be clear. It's a different frequency, and if you can, it's just like losing weight or getting on an exercise routine. Once you commit to that for a while, and you wake up every day for a while, and you just don't use whatever it is, your drug of choice, as a crutch, it becomes a lot easier over time, and it's like looking at the scale every day, and facing whatever you put into your body the day before. It shows up on the scale. And I mean, being sober and clear-minded is that same way. You drink or do drugs, and then the next day, you're hungover, and then all of a sudden you have more stuff to process, and you've lost another day in order to process that. Now, a lot of people don't see their life as something to process. Like, they don't see their emotional, I guess you could call it trauma, as something to process. They just see it as something either to suppress or ignore and just get on with life. And I think that's why you see people get, worse and worse over their life. You see them get angrier, have diseases, get sick more often, tired, lethargic, and their life, over the course of their life, actually goes downhill because they don't ever really deal with that trauma. And alcohol and drugs is a really good way to ignore and suppress all of the stuff that you're going through on a daily basis. That's why I think I attribute my sobriety to my life actually getting better as the days go by, and I can actually, I have the capacity to reprogram my mind. My subconscious and my conscious are more relatable. They're more together. They're working in sync with each other rather than being very separate from one another. I don't know the science on that, but I would imagine the disconnect between your conscious mind and your subconscious mind grows the more you use alcohol and drugs to give yourself that relief. And when you're sober and you start to observe your mind and the messages that it's telling you, you can actually start to reprogram those thoughts. Like right now, I'm really working on the physical realm. And I think if you really pay attention to the points in your life where you become frustrated and angry, the kind of like the pinch points are things that happen in the physical world. Like, I've noticed that a lot of times if I'm trying to, it can be as simple as trying to untie my shoe and a knot is created that I can't just pull my shoelace apart. I have to go in and sometimes I pull it too tight, and then I really have to work at it. And then all of a sudden I notice, oh gosh, I'm really frustrated right now, and I just swore as if that were somebody else's fault. Like, it was the guy who designed the shoelace and the way to tie shoes. Why haven't they figured out how to do this? Well, they have that. It's called Velcro, and most adults don't want to walk around with Velcro on their shoes because it looks stupid. So and then you realize, well, why did I just get so frustrated with something as simple as untying my shoe? I want to blame somebody. I want to swear. I want to get into that realm of anger. And then you realize it's something deeper, and then, so you've said to yourself, you hear your mind saying, God, who is this prick who designed shoelaces? Who the fuck thought of this? This is so stupid. And then you say to yourself, okay, this is the physical realm. I have shoelaces. They are bound by the laws of physics. They are not sentient beings. They mean me no ill will. And I have the patience and the maturity to simply deal with the problem. And that's attachment, When you try to untie your shoe and it gets snagged and it becomes a big tight knot, it's because you were attached to the idea that you were going to pull on that string and your whole knot was going to come undone and you were going to be able to take your shoe off and move on to the next thing. And now you're faced with the reality that you need to spend 2 minutes untying a difficult knot that you've just tightened down. And even though that's kind of a ridiculous and small and minute example, I mean, let's face it, that kind of stuff happens to us all the time. We make a wrong turn on the freeway and we waste an hour of our time going in the wrong direction or whatever it is, or maybe it's 2 minutes or 5 minutes, or maybe you bump the side of your garage as you're backing out of your garage, and you had this expectation that you were gonna get to work on time, and now you got to inspect your little dent, and now you got to think about insurance and getting it to the garage, and you were attached to that not happening. You were attached to a smooth morning commute, and now you are faced with something different. And going back to sobriety, sobriety doesn't give you any option other than to just kind of deal with that reality in the moment. And it may be hard at first, if you're thinking about being sober, but eventually you'll realize that, it's easier. Your whole life becomes much easier because you're able to process, especially if you bring that reprogramming consciousness into your mind or into your consciousness, that you actually can start to command your mind not to bring you down those emotional attached rabbit holes. One thing that I'll just close on this, one thing that I've been doing it's a common spiritual practice that many people do, but it's a little bit harder to put it into practice than it might seem. When I wake up in the morning and I first open my eyes, there's a tendency that I have to just bring this dread into my body. Like, oh God, another day. I think of all the things that I have to do during that day. And it's like I have to use some energy to not bring that dread into my body. And I do that by reprogramming the thoughts that are coming into my body by saying something like, it's a beautiful day, I'm healthy, my day is going to be filled with interesting things, I'm open to the beauty of the universe or the beauty of my experience. And I mean, it sounds really cheesy, but is it cheesier than letting that dread and those negative thoughts? I mean, think about how harmful it is to say, oh God, fuck all this fucking stuff I have to do. God, I'm just so tired. I mean, those are thoughts that just it doesn't take any energy to bring those thoughts. Those thoughts will just come right into your body and just like live there, you know. And I don't quite understand why negative emotions take very little energy. Maybe they do take energy. Maybe we're just so used to that energetic pattern that it's just so natural. And it's unnatural to start to reprogram those things in for the positive, or for, you know, don't even call them positive and negative, just call it like for living without anger and sadness and depression and frustration and disease. I mean, like just living clear and neutral and magnanimously. It takes energy to live equanimously, just balanced. It takes energy to do that, which is kind of crazy to think about it, because it's like we were born kind of half under the water, and our job is to just get up and float, you know. And it doesn't seem that hard to get to that 2 feet above where you're sinking in the water to get to the surface. But I've found, at least in my life, it takes energy and concentration and focus just to be floating on top of the water. So anyway, kind of a rant there. Again, like and subscribe, comment, please, on my YouTube channel. I'm taking this, you know, slowly. I'm not worried too much about all the little algorithms and worrying about, you know, my whole YouTube strategy right now. I'm just trying to put some content out there in this form so that people can, you know, people that like what I'm saying can just, you know, listen to me. But I'm going to get more strategic as things go along with my social media. So if you see me getting like cheesy with my thumbnails or doing some, you know, not clickbaity, but, you know, some stuff that gets people to listen to me, you know, don't be surprised, because I do want to grow the channel, and I'm willing to do things that you know, these social media platforms want to see in order to get people to listen to me. But mostly right now I'm just talking, trying to get, you know, my thoughts out there, simply because I'm just kind of being guided to do it. And that, you know, I'm 54 years old, and I actually feel like, you know, some of the experiences that I've had have put me in a place where I can speak to some of these things and potentially help some people. So I'm really just trying to serve. But I'd also at the same time like to have my channels be self-sustaining, and so that I can do more of this, because I really enjoy it, and I hope it's helping you guys. Rock on.